session on a go. It looks like we've got a reasonable group. Everybody hasn't actually disappeared off to bed, which was my suspicion. Tēnā rā tātou, ko Rebecca Redmond Takawinga. I am the MC for this group, and you guys have luckily been put into the best group of the evening. This is the voice of the researcher. We are going to be talking about, obviously, the dynamic between Ireland and New Zealand around research, obviously with an agritech tone. I actually work for AgResearch, which is a Crown Research Institute, and we do pastoral research, and I'm the sector manager for dairy and Agritechnologies. I've got a delightful panel of three with me tonight. I've got Karina Pearce from University of College Dublin. I've got Laurence Shalloo from Teagasc, and I've got our very own John Roche from the Ministry for Primary Industries. I'm going to get them to basically give a bit of an introduction about themselves, their sort of areas of research, and we'll kick off with a bit of question. Karina, I'm going to give you the very first chance. So basically, if you could just give us a little bit of a background about yourself, what particular research you're interested in, and probably a bit of context in terms of what does agri-tech or agri-technologies mean for you and the sort of the areas that you're in.
Before I start, well, delighted to be here. Thanks very much, Rebecca and Brendan, for asking me to be part of the event. I noticed neither myself or Laurence jumped in to reclaim John when you said our very own John Roche. You know, neither of us said actually he could be ours as well. So, yeah, no, delighted. So Karina Pearce is my name. I lecture and research in dairy production in University College Dublin. I am part-time based in the university and also out at Lyons Farm. So the university has a 250-acre farm in West Dublin. So that's an important part of what we do. I am also Director of External Relations in the School of Agriculture and Food Science. So that means that I work a lot with stakeholders, which I think is fitting given the conversation that we're having today. So Rebecca asked about what ag tech means. You know, I think we had briefly chatted before the event and realised that it can mean different things in different places in terms of, you know, some people assume it's hard technologies or biotechnologies, but I think in Ireland we probably look at it a bit beyond that. So I suppose it's the application of technologies to help increase efficiencies, to improve profitability, improve sustainability, to reduce costs, improve yields. So, I mean, but I think, you know, we would look at, and I'm sure Laurence will speak to this too, but ag tech as, you know, grassland technologies, as technologies to do with managing financials at farm level, breeding technologies. So like our economic breeding index, for example, we would consider as technology as well. So I think it's a broad church. And ag tech, I think, also used to explore new ways of working and to improve existing practices, which I think is really important. And I had come from the session with Ben Tyrrell and the Voice of the Farmer, and I think they were really talking to that about how ag tech can help to improve management at farm level. You're on mute, Rebecca.
I was just saying, yeah, and the decision making that goes along with that farmer sort of utilization of technology. Yeah. Thank you very much. That's a great introduction. We're going to break it up a little bit. We're going to bring our own John Roche between the two Irish. John, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit? You're pretty well known, but how about you answer that question, I guess, around what does agri-technology mean for you and sort of your role, your experiences?
Tēnā koe, Rebecca. Kia ora tātou e hoa mā, ko te kai toho toa mātanga pūtaia mātua, me te pau whakahere ki te mahi aha whenua, ki te manatua aha mātua, ko Crocon tōka manga, ko Maine, tōka awa, ko Norman, ko Celt, ko Irish, o ko iwi, ko County Kerry tōko hapu, ko John Roche tōko ingoa. Dia iwa korja, e sas erin me, e sas kunti kiri, balya napel, anriacht me, Sean the Roche to send him done. So thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, Karina, for not claiming me back. But I do know that Laurence was talking. He was just on mute, and I'm fairly sure he was raising.
That's what he was saying.
Absolutely. I'm not sure I've got much to add for those that don't know me, sorry, actually I should say it in English as well. I'm the Chief Science Advisor at the Ministry for Primary Industries and the Director of On-Farm Support Advisory Services, an advisory service established by the Ministry about 12 months ago. Yeah, so my area of science when I was a scientist was in the nutritional physiology area. By and large, I dabbled in farm systems, I dabbled in econometrics, but probably spent most of my postdoctoral career looking at body condition score, perfected gaining it myself, and but spent a lot of time working on it on the bovine. And there's a few agri-tech points there as well, I suppose. Look, I managed eventually to find my way through the menu and get to the voice of the farmer as well. And I thought that was a really good session for defining what agri-tech is. And it really depends on the position from where you're starting. You know, if you were an extensive farmer in East Africa, then the plow is magnificent agri-tech, despite it being 6,000 years old. And you come forward into our environment, and I know we'll talk about it later, but some of the mitigation technology, sequestration technology that we're developing to both meet our international obligations, our consumers' desires for our products, etc., and I think the vast majority of farmers I talk with, to meet their own sustainability goals. I think you've got a plethora in between there. So unfortunately it tends to get pigeonholed into machinery and digital. I regard biotechnology as one of the key enablers in the agri-tech world, hopefully into the future. I think one of my great farmer mentors, when he's asked if he has any agri-tech in his business, he has electricity in his milking shed. So yeah, different perspectives.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Thanks, John. Laurence, welcome.
Thanks, Rebecca. So yeah, Laurence Shalloo, here in Teagasc. I suppose I look after the animal and grassland research program here in Teagasc. My own background is modeling and systems. I suppose moving a little bit more into some methane work in the last few years. I suppose in the last, my view on ag tech has changed a good bit in the last few months, actually, because that New Zealand group that we're over, we had a view here, or I had a view maybe, that ag tech was very much in the digital space. But I suppose it's just that label, ag tech. What is it? But when we stand back from it, exactly as Karina and John have said, ag tech has a much wider meaning and definition. And it can be anything from sex semen to AI. How long ago was it AI was discovered? Like these technologies are constantly advancing, and we probably don't realize or don't take enough time to look back at what has been achieved. I suppose, on the digital side, we've done a little bit of work in this space, and I suppose speaking to farmers, and just give you one anecdote, a farmer, a few years ago, a farmer close to us here in Moore Park put in a rotary parlour, and it was a real fancy, all the bells and whistles type stuff. And I met him a week or two after he put it in, and he was all stories about all this thing on his phone, and it was amazing, and it was just amazing. And then about 2 months later, I met him again, and I asked him, I said, how's the kit going? He said, I switched all the notifications off, right? So for me, I think we need to be very clear about some of the digital stuff. We need, solutions, we need decisions. We don't need, vast amounts of information and knowledge. We need, information that's tidied into something that a farmer can use. Like that's, I think, why the collars have worked so well. Farmers can come out and the cows are drafted in the milking. No decision to be made. So I think we need to be clear on what ag tech can do, and it's massive. And we need to, I suppose, ensure that we don't, as researchers, we have a tendency to provide, look at all this amazing information, when we should actually be providing solutions and decisions to the farmers.
Yeah, Yeah. And so, like, I mean, obviously technology and climate change are two, you know, pretty big topics that are sitting right in front of our farming community, and us also as consumers and who want to eat the food, right? We don't certainly want to lose access to the food production systems, but we're also considering our environment and all of the impacts of that. From two perspectives, obviously climate is actually impacting farming, and we also want to, you know, improve our sort of ongoing environmental sustainability. John, I'm going to jump to you. Do you want to just talk to us, I guess, a little bit about where you sort of see technology and climate sitting in the science realm?
Yeah.
I mean, it's huge, but yeah.
It is. Sorry, that's where I was trying to think. Where do you start there? So if we start off with the first generation technologies, and those are the ones that are either available now or are coming on stream. And again, there was a good conversation in the Voice of the Farmer on this, and the need for trialing it, proving it, getting it into national inventory systems, and getting farmers credit for using it. Just thinking off the top of my head, I think there's probably 5 or 6 groupings of technologies that are either currently in development or are a long way down the pipeline of development. So you think of genetics and the exceptional work that your colleagues, Rebecca, have done in the ovine space, in the sheep space, and the work that's going on globally in both the dairy and the beef space as well. You've got rumen modifiers, so they could be natural type probiotic compounds that are either offered to an adult animal for a period of time and that knocks down methane, or potentially, and this is where there is a lot of research effort going in, being able to inoculate the rumen of the calf early in life so that it changes the rumen microbiome to reduce the amount of methane or reduce the amount of hydrogen ions that are there for methanogens to scavenge. You've also got the methane inhibitors. Oh, sorry, let's broaden the inhibitors. So you've got the methane inhibitors, the nitrous oxide inhibitors, the urea inhibitors that all have an impact, again, on the greenhouse gas emissions. You've got the effluent stroke slurry storage technology, and that could be anything from, you know, what has been developed in New Zealand by Keith Cameron and Hong Dee, sorry, at Lincoln University, and commercialized in the EcoPond technology, to the use of the methane that would be coming off a pond to generate electricity, either to go back into the national grid or to power the farm itself. And I'm sure there was a 6th one that I can't really think of. And they're the
Vaccines,
you know, they're the
maybe.
Vaccines. Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks very much. We didn't rehearse this beforehand, guys. By the way,
no, we didn't, obviously.
And they're the first generation technologies where there's a lot of effort gone in. I think the next generation technologies from a mitigation perspective will sit within the biotech realm, and that will be breeding ryegrasses or other feeds that will lead to a reduction in greenhouse gases. And I also think there's tech coming on board in the sequestration space. And that could be something as simplistic as altering our pasture species or our pasture species mix. And again, there's a lot of work going on in that space in Ireland, in New Zealand, in Australia, around diverse pastures relative to ryegrass, white clover pastures, and what are the implications for carbon sequestration at deep levels. Or, you know, one of the tech that really excites me is the idea of accelerated volcanic rock weathering as a country that is made up of volcanic rock, and the natural erosion of volcanic rock is a sequestration of carbon dioxide. And the early research certainly showing really promising results in that. I think we can probably reduce the greenhouse gas footprint of our products and increase the sequestration of our land, have our cake and eat it too.
Yeah. It's so with all of those sort of possibilities, Laurence, I might just jump to you because, you know, if I think about it, those technologies, how does the farmer technically kind of get their proof that they've done those applications or they've got those things? And also, I guess, could you talk a little bit, you guys have got Bovaer, obviously, in terms of available technology. And I'd be really keen for you even just to talk a little bit about how you're going about assessing all that stuff with MAC, with your, you know, marginal abatement curves, you know, just, you know, how is that actually going to land for a farmer And so therefore, what do other technologies need to do? How have they worked in your system, and and your inventory and all of that sort of stuff?
So yeah, and maybe if I refer back to Ben, when in the previous session, the farmer session, it was a little bit depressing actually. Ben's view that we technology maybe that our government maybe is driving an agenda there, and that is something that we need to make sure that the technology is out front here and the technology can deliver. So I suppose for me the start point here is measurement, right? And you might think that that's a bit basic, right? But what we're finding is that increasingly, as we get a little bit deeper into what we're measuring, particularly at grazing, we're finding that we're overestimating our enteric meating quite significantly across the grazing season. And the second thing that we're finding, which is again quite promising and quite exciting, is that seasonally we're seeing substantial differences across seasons. So, when we look at our models versus what we're measuring in the spring, we're measuring about 40% below what the models are saying. In the summer, it's about 18%, and the autumn, actually, the models and and what we're measuring are pretty much the same. So for me to start with, that's going to be, and it sounds a bit basic, and probably there's people on this call saying to themselves, why is he talking about measurement? Why are we that, we should have all this done? And to a large degree in a grazing setting around the world, we don't anywhere have it done to an extensive way. So that's the start point. The second thing is then what's happening with technology. And I think there is, strong progress being made here in terms of what can happen. I suppose if you look at the Irish situation, our big focus is very much on, to start with, is fertilizer use and fertilizer type. Traditionally we have been can based, calcium ammonium nitrate based, which has a much higher emission factor than urea based fertilizers. So the focus has been to reduce the quantity of fertilizer that we're using, and over the last 2 years we've got a 14% and a 15% reduction each year. So that's pretty dramatic now, driven probably by price to a certain degree. So that's the first thing. And the second thing then is about moving to protected urea type fertilizer. So that's, I suppose, one of our key strategies. The second key one then is more on the beef side, and it's reducing the age at slaughter of our beef cattle. And that's really, we are roughly running at about 26.5, 27 months for our steer systems here. And the target is to reduce them to below 24 months. And again, that's going to be done through management, through breeding, through identifying where the gaps are, and I suppose working through all those different, strategies to get there. The last two bits you asked about, the first one was about MRV. So how do we verify that we're making progress? And I suppose we're lucky from the point of view nationally, we have a very strong national database, our AIMS database, our animal movement and recording system. So all animals are recorded at all times, whether when they're born, when they die, when they move off farms. So that's going to be really important in terms of generating numbers around our age at slaughter. In terms of fertilizer use, that's very much done at point of entry when the fertilizer is imported into the system. We have that information. So, when we get down to technologies like feed additives, like John was talking about, I think a lot of that will be done at a kind of an industry level rather than at a farm level. So at the mill point, the processor point, there'll be the points rather than that material was sold to a farmer. I don't think we'll be getting down to the farmer part for those types of technologies. The last question I think you mentioned was the MAC, and the MAC is the marginal abatement cost curve, which is essentially a tool that we use to identify mitigation strategies and their related impact on profitability. So we have, this is our third iteration of the MAC. Gary Lanigan led this iteration. So essentially we did a first one in 12, we did another one in 18, and we've done one again now. And really what that's doing is projecting us out until 2030 in terms of our livestock projections and our mitigation. And from there we can look at technologies to target at farm level. And I suppose depending on how how aggressive or how ambitious we want to be, we can see that there is fairly significant reductions in greenhouse gases, driven by the key ones, genetics, age at slaughter, fertilizer.
Yeah. So, Karina, I guess, like sort of a lot of what we're talking about here is sort of beyond sort of the farm gate, but the efficiency and the processes and the age of technology in an on-farm system has sort of been increasing. What have you sort of seen around sort of efficiency or sort of other techs and other things that are sort of maybe coming down the pipeline, or that you think aren't really considered or haven't sort of landed in terms of inventory?
Okay, so Rebecca, can you just repeat that again? So what hasn't landed yet in terms of inventory?
Yeah, that's what, maybe it's a Kiwi term.
So I suppose just
Yeah.
well, feed additives maybe as an example is one where there's a huge amount of activity, has been obviously in New Zealand for years, Australia, in Ireland, very, very active in this space, but you know, maybe one product available commercially, hope that there will be a number of others down the road, but is, you know, there are a number of farmers maybe feeding them here, but it's not something that is counted yet at individual farm level or included in the inventory. And it will be some, Laurence might know as to when that will be counted, but it's going to be some time yet. So I mean, methane is obviously a very significant issue for us here and yourselves as well. So I think that would be a major one, you know, as well as the measurement, which, as Laurence mentioned, sounds really basic, but actually to know what animals are producing in a pasture-based system, the technology is now there to be able to measure that where it wasn't before. But I think feed additives is one that sort of springs to mind as already available, lots of activity there. So there will be others coming down the road, but it's going to be a difficult enough one, I think, to actually count in the inventory.
Yeah.
So we're a time away from that yet.
And I suppose, Karina, just to come in, just, you know, just in terms of, you know, the inventory in Ireland is run by the EPA as you know, and their barometer and their system for getting things into the inventory is very much driven by scientific peer-reviewed papers, which is brilliant because, you know, there's a good strong bar, and we, you know, there's a number of papers needed for each technology to get in, and that's well documented. So take example, and you mentioned it, Rebecca, Bovaer. You know, Bovaer, there's a number of studies now being done here, both at grazing and indoor, and they're, you know, the grazing ones are showing 6-7% reduction during the grazing, because, you know, you can only feed it morning and evening, and the indoor settings when fed in a TMR are showing, you know, 22, 25, 26% reduction. So I think they'll get in relatively soon, I think, Karina, into the inventory. You know, I can see them, you know, in the next couple of years, hopefully once the papers are published, you could see them getting in, but then as new technologies come, they'll take a little bit more time.
Yeah, and obviously then there's the commercial piece to it then, you know, what companies are offering them, how they're included in feeds, you know, the cost of them, you know, there's lots of other pieces along with that, as well as proving that the actual product works.
And so I guess I was just curious because, you know, from either a technology producer who might want to actually be looking to bring something that could be used in sort of in an inventory sense, or shown to be showing sort of some mitigation in terms of, you know, an animal system or a soil system. What I sort of hear you say, Laurence and Karina, is that actually that, you know, they're going to have to do some pretty deep, they're going to have to go pretty deep and wide peer review to get at that sort of government inventory sort of level. Is that sort of, I mean, that's from the Irish setting, and I'd assume it, John, it wouldn't be too different for us.
It's exactly the same, Rebecca. It's not just the government; these are internationally peer-reviewed research. So if Ireland or New Zealand put something into their inventory over the following 2 years, that is reviewed by an international panel to verify, so that people can't game the system. So the burden of proof is high, but the great thing is both of our countries are investing large amounts of dollars. The private sector is investing large amounts of dollars to build that burden of proof. And of course, with some of these things being chemical additives, and both of our countries producing food for many millions of people beyond our borders, our food safety systems are incredibly important as well. So the regulations around that and the assurance that we're not undermining the quality of very high quality animal products, and we're not creating something that could have perverse outcomes for human health.
And can I just add to that as well, Rebecca? I think we've seen in the past too where the science might stack up, but actually the consumer acceptance of what is created or the technology is also a really important part of the success. It's a slightly different question to the inventory, but obviously the use of it and the amount that's used, can sometimes then just come down to consumer acceptance of that technology. And that's really important as well, that we don't lose sight of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, we've only got a few minutes left, but I just wanted to touch a little bit on the farmer in terms of agri-tech and sort of well-being. I was just curious in terms of particularly probably from the Irish side, and or John, if you've got to jump in with any sort of with your on farm work. Are we seeing technology being adopted that is going to improve both sort of, I guess, the animal welfare, but also the farmer wellness? And can you sort of give us any examples or talk to that in any way? I'm just going to open the floor up to John, Laurence, or Karina.
So maybe I just pop in there for a second. I'll go back to Ben again in the farmer session. He talked about the use of technologies in the collars, and to be honest, I think this is where I think the ag tech world has been a little bit ahead of research to a certain degree. Because those technologies we were all worried about how accurate they were, and could they give us this to the exact second, and would we get 0.92 difference in survivability. But in reality, farmers have moved on, and they're using technology, and it's actually brilliant. You think of it, when a really busy time of the year during the breeding season, when animals can be drafted into the pen and be ready for AI. I suppose the next step there is that if it's a technician that's coming on to do AI, that's automated as well. So for me, the technology is having and it can have a huge role in terms of reducing labor and increasing farmer well-being. But we just need to be careful that we give the farmer useful information and not data. We just when the technology refines the decision down for the farmer, then it can be hugely valuable.
Karina, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think one of the biggest stresses on farms in terms of farmer well-being is the, as we become more successful around breeding and fertility, is the stresses at different points of the year, and the how difficult it is actually to get labour onto farms. So that technologies that genuinely reduce the workload at times of the year, or maybe make certain tasks a bit more enjoyable because you're taking some of the, you're just changing the way it's done. I think that's, really important, a really important role that ag tech has to play.
John, do you want to jump in and give anything from a New Zealand perspective?
Yeah. Look, I agree with what both Karina and Laurence have said. The ag tech world, there's a graveyard of ag tech out there that has never been successful on farms, and that's largely because it was a solution looking for a problem. I mean, Laurence summed it up very, very well. If you look at some of our greatest inventions over the last 100-odd years, they actually had their birth on farm. The electric fence. It was Bill Gallagher, Sir Bill Gallagher's dad, that brought in the first electric fence into New Zealand. Farmers were already rotational grazing 30 years before scientists had nailed the coffin shut on set stocking, and he brought in the technology, and then it was Doug Phillips, the scientist, along with him, that revolutionized it. Ron Sharp, farmer, 6 kilometers to the east of me in Hamilton, invented the herringbone milking shed because he had a slip disc and he couldn't bend to milk cows anymore. So he dug a pit behind them, and he invented the herringbone milking shed. And Merv Hicks, as we know, invented the rotary milking shed. So I think I think Laurence summed up a really good point. There's two aspects to tech and farmer mental health and well-being, I believe. Is one, the example that Laurence gave earlier of the farmer that has got paralysis by analysis. He's got literally data flowing towards him, and he has no idea, or she has no idea, what they want to do with that. I think that's the danger of too much. The flip side of it is, again, I think to Laurence's point, is these things that just take some of the stress out, take some of the work out. It's very easy to do these experiments when you've got a labor unit to a livestock unit. You're running across 20 or 30 cows. The person that's doing that across 300 cows, or the 2 or 3 people that are doing it across 1,000 cows, they're the ones that will really road test tech and its value for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I add one other thing, Rebecca, though, from
go for it.
a New Zealand perspective? And this is the same in Ireland. The age profile of our farmers is such that they're, you know, a large chunk of them, technology actually scares, sorry, it's the wrong word, but they don't take it up because, you know, they've moved past that generation by and large of taking up tech. And I think that's an important point for researchers, and in particular social researchers, because a lot of what we've talked about in terms of regulatory settings, regulatory reporting, etc., that will all be done online. That will all be done on computers. That will all be done, well, hopefully a lot of it will be done with automated collation of data. So we need those people comfortable with those data collation systems.
Yeah. I'm sad to say, I have got so many more questions, but we are actually coming to the end of our session. Maybe we'll be able to come back and talk about some of the things around, you know, technology consumer acceptance. Obviously, we've got the Vista Milk program. There's a whole raft of other things we could be talking about, but I'm going to say thank you very, very much to Karina, Laurence, and John. Thank you so much for joining me. I was delighted that I got you crew, and I'd just like to say to the crew that are here listening, and you guys got the best deal. But you can actually hear the other session online.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thanks, Rebecca.